Hey guys, and welcome to Fireside Chat with the Johnstons. I'm Danielle Johnson, and I'm your host for this week's episode. If you guys are not familiar with us, my husband Justin and I run Twister Sports in Warrensburg, Missouri, an all-star cheerleading and gymnastics gym in a very small town. On top of that, we are two of the owners of Next Generation Gym Owners, All-Star Cheerleading Business Consulting. So we help gym owners to earn their freedom from their gyms, become profitable, get new kids into the sport, and keep those who are currently in the sport and loving it. Okay guys, so on the last episode, I talked to you about the challenges of working with your spouse. Of course, this is my second episode alone, so as we talked about that, we talked about how sometimes your schedules just do not align. And that is one of the challenges that we have been experiencing on this Fireside Chat podcast. If we do not get our regular recording day and time every single week, we find that it is very hard for us to connect the remainder of the week and get in work mode to do this. So I do apologize that Justin's not here. I know he's the fun one, but I am excited to be with you guys here today. So last week we did talk about the challenges of working with your spouse, whether that is, the money and trying to figure out how do you make more of it and make sure that the two of you are on the same page and aligned with your strategy. Or maybe the strategy itself. Maybe you kind of know where you want to go with your gym and you both have different ideas of how to get there. Maybe you find that you under-communicate, which is probably the more common one, or you over-communicate at all the wrong times. I talked to you a little bit about how I am like my best time of day, my zone of genius is in the morning, and Justin's is definitely at night. So today I'm going to go over some of the things that we have done to try to resolve those in the last 13 years of owning our gym. And I will tell you guys, with every new season of life, those challenges have to be kind of resolved over and over again. So, when the kids were little, we opened our gym and they were like, youngest I think was 2 years old and the oldest was 9. And now it's all the way, our youngest is 14, about to be 15, and our oldest is like 22. And so things have certainly changed over the years. And I think with each new phase of life, you get these new challenges. And then sometimes you get to reattack things that you had already sort of fixed the first time. So if you're listening to this and you think of something, you're like, oh, we've got that down, like we figured that out. Know that with each new phase, you may have to figure it out kind of all over again, and that's okay. Business is not this steady hill where you're constantly going uphill. It is definitely a series of hills and valleys that, sometimes when you're hiking up the mountain, you have to go down just a little bit to go right back up. And so if you feel like sometimes you get frustrated, know that this is all part of the process. Okay, so with that, let's get started. When you are talking about working with your spouse, first thing I want you to do is clearly define your roles. In the last episode, I told you that in our gym, I'm kind of the, final decision maker. If we have questions on something or if a decision needs to be made with staff or with our business partners, I tend to be the final person who's making that decision. Whether that has to do with hiring or maybe even firing a staff member, whether it has to do with raises or the finances, for the most part, unless we're talking about like construction that is just not my forte, or buying a building or negotiating a contract, all of those are definitely things Justin is better than me at. But unless we're talking about, something really big like that, I would be the final decision maker in our gym. And how have we established that? Because we have clearly defined roles. So again, this is something that happens with each new stage of life. So in 2013, I went full-time at the gym. And I was the kind of decision maker and authoritative figure when it came to, okay, what payroll company are we going to use? Who's going to do our taxes? What attorney will we use to do our contracts and liability waivers and stuff like that? In 2015, Justin quit his full-time job and also went full-time at the gym. At that time, we had to kind of reassess the things that I was doing and say, does it make sense for Danielle to be negotiating contracts on our lease at our building. Not really. It's not something I'm good at. I am not detailed enough looking through some of those, contracts and leases. I don't always understand what some of it says. Of course, you can Google everything, but Justin is naturally very good at those things. So we had to reassess those areas. So for a couple of years, I feel like we sort of went back and forth. Who's in charge of this? Who's in charge of this? And it definitely created conflict, especially when you both think you're in charge of something. It's going to be a challenge. And so it took us a little bit of time to more clearly identify those roles. It's more challenging than simply making an organizational chart and putting your name in the boxes, right? Because there is emotion tied to a lot of the decisions that you're going to make. In 2016, when we decided to buy a building, Justin was really good at going around and finding us all these facilities to go look at. But he also knew that it kind of had to be my final decision. Is this facility going to work for us? Can I make it work with, 16 to 18 foot ceilings? I know a whole bunch of you are saying, no, you can't make it work, but we've done it and we've done it really well for almost 10 years now. Okay, so it is possible. Nevertheless, when we looked at the layout of the building, he had to really rely on us and allow us to have the final authority. And I say us, meaning Angie and I, my business partner. Will this facility work? Can we make it work? The mortgage payment, and can we have enough to set aside when we need new AC units and stuff like that? We had to have those really clearly defined roles. Now, I say that I'm the final decision maker. But guys, when your air conditioning goes out and you need to get new air conditioning or something like that happens, when it comes to facility, I have pretty much given all authority over to Justin at that point. As long as it fits in the budget, which I make that decision on, he has the ability to spend within that budget or 20% outside of that budget, which is how I budget it for my husband because I know him. Okay, so you have to have these clearly defined roles, and the roles may not always align with what you have in the household. Maybe one of you tends to be the decision maker with the kids, and it's a different person at the gym or vice versa. But it's really important that you have those roles and they're defined and you can both respect them enough to follow them. The number 2 thing that we have had to do, we've had to overcome some of the challenges that other people bring into the dynamic. So for example, if you were to have a coach that one of you just loves and the other wants to not love anymore, you want to send that person packing, okay? You run into this dilemma. And so Justin and I have had to navigate situations like that over time. Additionally, on the last episode, I talked about the challenges if you have a child who works for you or a family member. Ultimately, this will come back to the role itself again. So within our organizational chart, we do have somebody who is ultimately in charge of HR. And so we've had to really step back in those moments when Justin's mom or his sister or one of our kids was working for us. And we had to say, who is in charge of HR? For us, it worked really well to just not let it be either of us. But I do understand if you're a smaller gym or, you don't have this big staff of key leaders, that one of you is going to have to be in charge of HR. So when you run into these challenges, know that if, let's say, a husband and wife are working together and they own the gym, and the husband's sister or mother works within the gym, who is in charge of HR in that moment? That is going to be a really, really challenging thing to have the husband have to potentially tell his mother or his sister that they have made mistakes or whatnot. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, who would hire their family? Oh my gosh, guys, I could name a dozen gyms off the top of my head, because we are, at the end of the day, small businesses and we hire those we trust. And a lot of times we hire those that we trust who know the sport, which tend to be those within our family. We've really had to rely on that role and trusting that whoever is in that HR role is capable and calm and can take the most professional approach possible. And our kids have had write-ups before when they're working. Our family members have had write-ups before. We don't even do that many write-ups, but of course your family at times is going to feel the most comfortable in your business. Funny story, Justin's sister used to do cleaning in the gym, and she would actually come in and I would have trouble finding something later, and she would say, oh, well, I moved it. This is a much better spot for it. Look how I organized all this. And it just drove me crazy. And she had the very best of intentions, but it required us to kind of go to that HR person and say, okay, we really need to have this conversation now because it's making it harder for us to work, or it's taking longer. It's inefficient to be consistently moving things around and whatnot. It's just not part of that job. It was helpful to have that HR person, but it's also helpful to not let that person be the spouse whose family might be working within the gym. Okay, on the last episode, I talked to you about work-life balance. Sort of. I don't necessarily know that I said those words, but we talked a lot about how I'm super efficient in the mornings and Justin is super efficient at night. And so this was probably, I know this sounds so silly, but it was probably one of the most challenging things that we had to figure out over the years. When are we going to have those conversations that I want to have first thing in the morning because my brain feels fresh, and he wants to have last thing at night after I get home from coaching because he's had the whole day to think about it. Neither of us are wrong in those situations. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, I slightly rolled my eyes. Just kidding. But neither of us are wrong in that situation, but it was definitely one of the biggest challenges because I think both first thing in the morning and, last thing at night, you can tend to be a little bit more emotional. You've just put kids to bed, or you've just got kids out the door, ready for school. You are tired. That is my number one thing when I'm emotional. It's because I'm tired or hungry or something like that. Or maybe you had a rough night coaching, or you had a great night coaching, but you're like me and 4 hours of coaching really takes it out of me. We've had to just really be able to say to each other, I can't talk about this right now. Just a reminder, it's morning. This is not when I can talk to you about this. Or just a reminder, it's after 9 p.m. I just can't talk about this right now. Can we talk about it tomorrow? And so we've had to get really good at not only saying that and identifying that, but also being able to say it in a way that is non-emotional, right? Because if, Justin comes to me at 9 o'clock tonight and wants to talk about something with the gym, and I just say, oh my gosh, Justin, it's 9 o'clock, you know this. That's really not going to work well for us either. A lot of times I have to respect the fact that his brain has really just been mulling over something all day, and he's finally ready to, kind of talk about it, or he has been trying to troubleshoot something in his mind for the day and he's ready to talk about it. And I have to have that same level of respect. Hey, I really do want to talk about this. My brain is kind of turned off for the night. So would it be okay if we do this tomorrow, around lunchtime? Right. And so hopefully you guys are lucky enough that you're both night owls, or you're both early birds, or your brains just function at the right time of day. God bless you if that's the case, because a lot of the couples I know who work together, that can be one of their biggest challenges. One of the other things that we've kind of talked about is that, when you are maybe on a vacation or you're out to dinner, it can definitely be a challenge to find that element of work-life balance. You would think that because you work together, you have so much more patience for the fact that one of you is answering emails or replying to parents or, texting the staff, or you have to stop by the gym really fast. You would think that that is this new level of understanding because you both work in the same place, but I'm here to tell you it can actually be very, very challenging. There are times that my brain has fully shut out the gym and I'm the staff has it under control, we're good. And Justin gets a call that something is wrong with the plumbing, or the lines have backed up over there, or our baseball machines are not working, or the power went out and shut off, we circuit or whatever. I actually don't know anything about electricity, but the bounce house stopped working and it's an electrical thing, and we get these moments that it kind of stings. He has to run over there last minute and take care of things. And we've had those moments earlier on in our business that a staff member didn't show up, or a parent was angry and they called me over. Where we dealt with those early in business, I tend to get less patient about it 13 years in, because I'm oh my gosh, these are just silly facility things. And so it can be really hard when one of you is in work mode or having to really shift over into work mode and the other is not. And I don't think that the fact that you guys work together really negates that, right? It's not you should be less frustrated. Because I think a lot of times if I had to run over to the gym because somebody didn't show up, I think Justin would have a level of frustration at times because he would be like, hey, we should have this under control by now. We should have 2 other people that we can call in and, get them over to the gym so that you don't have to be there. So I think sometimes it's that level of like, we know that we can do better. And so we get more frustrated with our spouse because of that. So for us, we've really had to think in that moment of frustration, now is not the time to resolve it, right? In the moment where I am frustrated, that is not when we should resolve the fact that our plumbing consistently may have an issue, or the arm always falls off the pitching machine when somebody turns it too tightly. I've learned that when he gets home from fixing something at the gym is not the exact best time for me to say, we should really have a system for that. For us, if you have a spouse who is in charge of like the maintenance side of things, we have a maintenance form and it dictates, is this an emergency or is it something that can get fixed within the next couple of days? The staff completes that form, and only if it's an emergency do they call us and say, hey, I need you to come over to the gym. Something is flooding or something like that. Kind of on my end, it's, are we being proactive and trying to solve things and resolve things in advance? Right? Am I avoiding a situation and then, of course, a staff member doesn't show up because I avoided conflict for too long and kind of knew that that was going to eventually bite me? Or is it something that I kind of dealt with head on and said, okay, I can foresee this being an issue. If I procrastinate on it, I really need to handle it in advance so that it doesn't surprise me later on. Nevertheless, it's something that we've had to learn. Don't deal with it in that situation. You really need to hold it. We do regular business meetings every week. If you are a husband and wife duo or something like that, this would honestly still work for business partners as well. You should be doing a regular weekly meeting. That weekly meeting is really great because it prevents you from feeling like you need to make those comments in the moment. Instead, it allows you some time to think about it and think of a productive and professional way to say it to one another. Like, hey, would it be okay if we write a system for how to fix the baseball arm so that it doesn't keep falling off the machine because somebody, turned it too tightly or too loose or like however that happens. But can we write a system so that the staff can fix that and you don't have to go in next time? Right? And so I think it's less heightened emotions and we can have that conversation later on. And I feel comfortable and confident having that later on because we have that business meeting that's already scheduled in advance. Okay, next up is maintaining professionalism. I am going to tell you, this is not my strong point at all times. Of course, I have this dry, sarcastic sense of humor, and jokes sometimes come out that shouldn't come out in the moment. I have been told on Fireside Chat that that's what she said is not appropriate. I also have experienced those moments where I am just frustrated with Justin and we have to walk into a business meeting, or we have to go to the gym together and do trunk or treat, or we have to go into the gym together and do the daddy-daughter dance or something like that, right? And so probably like the challenge of my life has been compartmentalizing things. I am truly just not good at it. I tend to wear some emotions on my sleeve. You can see it on my face. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my reaction on my face a lot of times. And so it has been one of the greatest challenges in my life to learn how to compartmentalize things. At the end of the day, I think what really helped me was remembering my staff doesn't deserve to be part of the argument, right? So if Justin and I are frustrated with each other for whatever reason, my staff doesn't deserve to be part of that. And so maintaining that level of professionalism was super important to make sure that I can go in and my staff can have a great experience with whatever we're doing, whether it's, a staff meeting or training or a staff party or whatever it is. And knowing that at the end of the day, like we will come home and we'll resolve whatever it is that needs to be resolved. I also think that you have to know when to tap out though, right? Maybe you've had this big conflict, we've raised at this point 3 teenagers, we're on our 4th teenager, and we've had 5 foreign exchange students. And not every one of those exchange students or our own teenagers has been easy over the years. And so surely there are times that Justin and I have, experienced those really emotional moments. And then they don't come at convenient times. And sometimes you have to go back to the gym and you have to go coach or work together or something. And I think that you have to know when to tap out. You have to know when to say, hey, is there anybody who can go work my private lesson for me right now? Or I have to deal with this. Can you guys do without me on this particular event? I've had a couple of those over the years, and I think it's kind of like any other job where you can take a mental health day sometimes. It's really hard to do that as the boss, but it's necessary sometimes. It's hard to do that as an owner. I want my staff to be able to do it, so I want that same ability to do so when necessary. But then I also think we've got to be able to give that grace to others, right? And so if you can give the grace to others, then you should be able to have it as well. That said, if you're the owner who's doing absolutely everything, answering the phones, taking the enrollments, greeting people at the front desk, coaching the classes, closing the gym, opening the gym, and cleaning the gym, that's going to be really hard for you. So let that be one of many, many reasons that I believe that you should be good at delegation, have those systems and accountability in place so that when you need to take that mental health day or you need to tap out for a little bit, you can do that. Make sure that your spouse is supportive of that too. Talk about it in advance and say like, hey, sometimes I just need to tap out. I need to not work with you today, or I need to take a little bit of time away, and that's okay. We're both going to agree that that's just okay today. Not only have we had to create those boundaries, but we've had to have over communication. And I talked in the last episode about over versus under, but I have to have over communication when we're doing family things and the gym might need me for something. So for example, and I shouldn't even just say the gym, but one of our businesses. For example, last year we started a new business, and so you can take this as the gym or any other, business that you may have or venture. But we started a new business and it demanded a little bit of my time, and it didn't really matter if I was on vacation or not. Sometimes the staff had questions. Sometimes there was a little bit of troubleshooting for me to do. And I had to be very clear with Justin prior to going on vacation, like, hey, this is what things look like at work right now. I might be needed. I might have to step away and take some phone calls. I need you to be patient with me in that moment because it won't always be like this, but this is how it is for the moment right now, right? And I think we tend to forget that just because our spouse works with us, they still may have a level of expectation that's different than what reality might be. So even though Justin and I work together, I can't just assume that he knows that the staff might need me for something, or they may have questions or something that can't wait, right? I have to make sure that I over communicate that in advance. It has made a world of difference by anticipating those things and kind of knowing it and preparing him in advance. Of course, it's helpful for you guys to be able to take vacations, have some quality time together. A lot of people have told me over the years, we want to have other hobbies, things that we talk about. We go out to dinner and we just don't talk about business at all. I think it's been hard for us to try to find that balance. And I don't know if we have it perfectly yet. Like if you were to say, what are my hobbies? Like, I love cheerleading. It's a hobby. I do like sewing. I'm new at it. I'm not very good at it, but I can make a pillowcase. That's me trying to be domestic, I guess. But if you ask truly, what are my hobbies? I love cheerleading and I love business. And so I read business books for fun. And so it's really hard to then say, okay, well, you guys can't talk about business when you're at dinner together. That's unreasonable because for both of us, that is a hobby. Just know that when you're talking about those things, if it starts to feel like, man, I've just been at work 24/7 for a week, you do need to tap out and have a different conversation for a while. But if you're like us, then that's okay. You just have to, for me, I can go out and we can have dinner and we can talk about business. As long as I'm not making decisions or troubleshooting something in the moment, it doesn't feel like I'm working. It feels like I'm enjoying a hobby and talking to my husband about my hobby. So if you're spouses and you go out and you want to talk about your world's team or your who got deductions last weekend or, how your stunts are hitting, know that if that's your hobby, that's okay too. Of course, it's important to make sure that you're learning from your mistakes, learning from your challenges. Guys, have grace with one another. It is extremely hard to work together. Someone told me recently, I feel like if we can't work together, then we shouldn't even be married. And I totally disagree with that. I think that most people who are married don't work together. It's not a sign that you're incapable of anything. It's not a sign that you have done anything wrong. It doesn't even mean that people who work well together are better in any sense, right? It's so hard to do it. And if you're doing it and doing it well, congratulations. I will say, of the 4 different gyms who own Next Gen, Rihanna and her husband have worked at the gym together before, and they chose that it was better to not work at the gym together. Shelly and her husband have co-owned the gym, and they decided that it was better for her to kind of take the lead on those things. Dan and Tori work together at the gym, and they run the gym together. Justin and I run the gym together. It doesn't mean that anyone is better at anything than anybody else. It's simply a matter of choice and what you desire to have in your life. And that is not a good thing or a bad thing, no matter what. So if at one point you're like, man, I just don't think that we're going to stay married if we continue to do this. Number 1, make the changes that you believe need to be made first. If you're both on board with that, we've been in that moment before, and we just had to simply make the changes and commit to being better at working together. And if you've done that for a long time and it's not working, it's okay for one of you to have another job outside of the gym. Doesn't mean that you failed in anything, doesn't mean that you love the gym any less. It works for some people and it doesn't work for others. But at the end of the day, going to be old one day and you're going to be maybe retired, hopefully sitting on a beach somewhere. And you want to make sure that that person who is sitting beside you is a person that you invested a lot of love and time and commitment into over the years. So do not let the gym ruin your relationship. Do what you need to do to make sure that you have the person you love beside you, that you can support each other in the ventures and in your goals. Okay, guys, so while working with your spouse is challenging, there is no doubt about that. Those who are super committed to it, guys, there are so many valuable resources and tools out there to do it. Read the 5 love languages, do the personality tests. The best thing you can do is learn about each other, learn about your work styles, have very open conversations, open communication. And when you start feeling burned out, really important that you're telling your spouse. Okay? So, guys, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Fireside Chat with the Johnstons. I look forward to having Justin with me on the next episode, where maybe he can weigh in on what it's like to work with a spouse. I'm sure you guys hear our little comments every so often. And with that, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode.